Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Balanced and Bougie. In similar form to how we've done things in the past, we are going to take a break on the series we just started to talk about something that is happening in the here and now. Like, we just want to be current, we want to be up to date with you guys. Before this conversation started, Eric and I have already been on the phone for like 30 minutes, just catching up with each other, things about life, and we got into talking about something that Erica's dealing with and just thought that it might be beneficial to share with you guys. So that's nice and vague. But Erica, let's start today. Outline just what has gone on in this past week for you. What's that challenge that, you want to bring forward for our audience?
So this past week is one of those like big check-in weeks. I only see my neurologist and my occupational health doctor like every couple months now because when you're over a year into your brain injury, your healing kind of slows. You don't notice as much, so you don't need to be going to those doctors as often since considering I'm in like several therapies and I have different therapists who are tracking me on like a bi-weekly basis. So this week I went to my neurologist. I went to some other doctors too, but I'm just going to focus on that first like neurology visit. And now I only see him very infrequently. I'm actually going to go 6 whole months till I see him again, which is actually kind of scary as a brain injury patient because that means like so little is probably going to happen in 6 months. At least that's how I hear it. Like so little is going to happen in 6 months, or there's so little difference he can make that I'm not going to see him at all. I'm just going to see, like the therapists for an extended period of time. While I was there, he, didn't really have any additional input. He just wants me to keep doing the therapies, which is fair. Like, I understand that the neurologist cannot possibly have all of the answers. He is not omnipotent. He is a very intelligent, very, compassionate person, but he does not have unlimited resources and options and ideas. But it kind of seems to be turning into when I go in there, they're just offering me medication, which some people might be happy about, but makes me pretty uncomfortable. I have really serious migraines from this brain injury. Before I started, I am taking medication just to be honest with everybody. Even though I'm saying I'm uncomfortable, I am taking medication. I was having migraines like 15 to 20 days a month, which was making life very difficult. I did very little. Like I would see my friends and do things, but like the activities we did were limited. And then sometime in the early fall, I was put on a medication. It was very scary for me. It was a monthly injection, which I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be exposing, like opening up my body to something, creating like a hole that is going to get infected. My mind is going crazy because that's who I am. Or I'm going to inject this medication and I'm going to go crazy. Fun fact, side note, I am actually super allergic to it. I like have my lungs will seize and I'll cough and I'll like get hives all over my body, and they were like, oh, just take Benadryl. So every time I have to take this medication, I just take Benadryl and I do the shot and I like hope I don't go into anaphylaxis, which sounds crazy, but the effects of this medication has been life-changing. Like I'm down to like, at first it was like 2 to 3 migraines a month, and now I'm back to like 5 or 6, but it is still, I have so much more freedom and I can really make plans with people and friends and family and feel confident that I'm likely going to be okay. So I'm taking the medication and I'm like, okay, I only have 5 a month. That's what I say to the neurologist. I'm only having 5 migraines a month. So I'm doing better with that. And then I like talk about all my other issues. All my other issues are just like, fix it with therapy, maybe. And then he's like, okay, I'll give you migraine medication on top of this medication. Like,
Another migraine medication on top of the shot.
yeah, so technically, actually, when I'm talking about it, I take a nightly medication that's supposed to like help my nervous system not have headaches. I don't even know what it is because it's not a pain medication. It's a kind of like a really low dose of an anxiety medication, and it's supposed to help not trigger migraines or keep the system like in homeostasis and level. I take that every night, and I have since the day I got kicked in the face. And then the shot I started late fall, so then that was those two together all for the last several months. And then every time I go to the neurologist, he prescribes me a different like migraine pain medication, which I understand why. I'm sure people are in there constantly being like, please give me something. And there are moments where I feel that way, where I'm like, oh, I really want this pain to go away. But what I'm struggling with is like, am I just supposed to take this medication for the rest of my life? Like 3 medications every time I get a headache? Where I would prefer when I get those headaches to I use like an ice roller on my face. I go to sleep. If I have access to like a really big smoothie or juice, a lot of times those can help a little bit more than like water, I think, because there's just like vitamins and minerals that kind of like flush through the system. But it feels like everything is just like, here, take a pill and leave. Like, and these pills, they're not going to fix anything. None of the medications I'm on are to help it get better. It is just to make it bearable to go through. So there's no treatment to improve the migraines.
That's insane to me. And it's like, again, I completely agree. I know what you're saying. Your doctor cares for you in that way of like, he wants to see you not suffer with this. And he's like, okay, let's get those migraines down from 5 to 6 to 1 to 2. But this medication stacking, you're right. Like it's the reason we're bringing it up is, again, caveat here, of course, we are not hating on medications for the right reasons, but here I think is a great example of when we were talking earlier, Erica expressed that she's like, I'm not feeling comfortable with this, but it was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, that this is kind of the only option you're being met with.
Truly, it is kind of the only thing they're offering me right now, which is, I understand, maybe the only thing they can do. And I think he is being caring and considerate, and I appreciate that. But, I told him, like, he gave me one medication 2 months ago that I took one time, and I didn't like the way it felt. I wasn't, like, loopy or anything. I just felt off. Like, I just didn't feel great. And if I take any of these medications, I'm not supposed to drive, and I wouldn't be able to work. Not that I'm working right now specifically, but I wouldn't be able to like record this podcast right now. So I wouldn't be able to do the stuff I normally do. And I told him, like, I'm going to be real with you. I would rather take a Tylenol and drink a large coffee and then take a nap. And like that kicks the migraine almost as well as these medications. And I'm like, I'm aware that Tylenol is a medicine, but I know it's like, it has we have a much greater history of what it does to the body, and all of those, all of the side effects we're more aware of, whereas the migraine medications, like, you read these, they have crazy side effects, like affecting your personality, your brain functioning. And my brain is healing. Like, taking more medicine that could impact my cognitive functioning is just not on my radar. So I go into these appointments and I basically have to be like, I haven't been taking the medicine you gave me. I took it once, then I refused to take it, which makes me look like non-compliant. So I'm assuming that some people feel like they almost have to take that medication because their doctor gave it to them. And I even know with certain medications, they like blood test you every month to make sure you're taking all of them, which is a precaution against like drug selling, which I understand. But I do think it like pushes people to use the medication more than necessary. And again, let's be clear, I'm not talking about medication that needs a daily buildup tolerance in your body. I'm talking medication you're supposed to take at symptomology, which is like a pain medication or this migraine medication. And so now he's given me another one, and I was like, I just didn't take the first one. It's not that the first one didn't work at all, it's that it didn't work better than Tylenol and coffee, and I would rather not take it. So now I have a new one, which I've taken once because I feel like I have to take it at least once to show that I'm listening to the doctor, before I then refuse to take it for the next several months. But it's fine. Like it works a little, but it's not fixing anything. It's just taking away the pain for a little bit. And that does lead me to a place of kind of feeling frustrated, or I don't want to say like, I'm almost like I'm in despair because I'm like, this medication is not fixing me. It's not making my brain healthier, better, anything. It's just taking the pain away for a little bit. It's a Band-Aid fix. And I'm willing to deal with the pain if I can have an actual improvement.
I think this is the perfect example of how our healthcare system is stuck in the monster it created, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, we are saying that it's not this doctor's fault. It's not something wrong with them. They care. They're helping in the way that they know how. But we all know as educated individuals now that big pharma runs our hospitals and doctors, have to prescribe these things. And so many times it's either I'll refer you to someone else or I'll give you a medication or both, right? Or I'm gonna refer you to someone else who then can give you this medication to help. It's always this acute, like we'll address the
Mm-hmm.
pain, we'll address this now. And where's the long-term view? And it's crazy that you're showing up trying to get that, trying to work through that, making an active choice. And I know we've talked about like you have a right to go into your doctor's office and
Mm-hmm.
not accept everything they give you, question it, push back, advocate for yourself. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what's so heartbreaking and frustrating is here's someone doing that. She's like, these are my values. This is how I want to approach my healing. And they're like, okay, so another medication? And you're like, no. But where do you
Mm-hmm.
turn? What do you do?
Right. And I want to give him like the defense I have for him, is that he literally has nothing else, right? He's given me all the therapies, right? He's prescribed me, he's done what he can, and he's run many tests. So at this point, he's probably sitting there thinking, migraines have no treatment. Like there is nothing I can do to make them stop happening. And part of me wonders, outside of my immediate doctor, is this like, are we just, what is medicine studying? Are we studying, and this is probably going like, conspiracy theory hole. So like, don't listen to me, guys. I'm an uneducated random person, right? But like, are we looking into the treatment of like curing and stopping forever the medication, or like the migraines or other illnesses? And maybe migraines are just one that we can't fix, right? But I, it even makes me think back to our Ozempic episode. It's like the idea is you take it forever. And so the idea with my current medication is that I will take it for the rest of my life, which, brings up other issues. So the injectable medication, really all of them, but mostly the injectable medication, you're not allowed to like have children while you take. So the idea is that I'm supposed to take it forever and either not have kids or just go off it and like be completely screwed for over a year because you can't take it for 6 months before you get pregnant. And like these are things that I think people don't realize you will end up facing and having to make these insane choices where you're like, I'm either going to be in pain for over a year to achieve this, or I'm not going to get to have children. And this issue is going to come up with other, not just having kids, but it's the one that I recently asked my doctor about. Because the medication isn't getting me closer to not having migraines anymore. It is just handling them right now. And I'm grateful for it. I am. Like, I think that the Ajovy saved my life because it made me functional again. But it is interesting to me that it's not helping,
Yeah. And one thing too that this all kind of brings up then too is, okay, so you're going into these appointments, you're voicing these concerns, you're sharing all the work that you do, and then I feel like I want to talk a little bit more too about like in addition to just being like given medication, some of the reactions that you're getting from your doctors.
Oh, I totally know what you're talking about. Yeah. So this makes me really mad. Like, full transparency, I'm going to talk about something that makes me like, it's a very touchy subject for me. So obviously, I've mentioned I don't know if you want to use the word assaulted. That feels harsh to me, but I was injured by another person. I was kicked in the face. It sucked. I don't really remember it very well, because it knocked my brain up pretty bad. And so every time they read that, and maybe due to other reasons, I have had every single doctor I see tell me they think I'm depressed or tell me they think I'm traumatized from the experience. And I keep trying to say to them, like, yes, I probably have some depressive tendencies when, especially in the beginning when I couldn't drive, I couldn't read, I couldn't talk well to people. Like, I literally could do almost nothing. I could barely string a sentence together fluidly. Yes, I had some depressive feelings, but I keep telling them, like, I'm handling this as well as can be expected. And for some reason, and maybe this is my own, like, issue a little bit too, but, like, I feel like they are discrediting the severity of what I'm experiencing by telling me, oh, I think you're depressed. And I'm like, I'm the normal amount of upset for somebody who got kicked in the face at 26 years old and has now lived a full year of life being totally shifted. Like, I went to college to be a teacher, which, like, eventually I'd probably quit teaching anyway, but there's what, 40, 50, $60,000 in schooling that is just gone because I can't do that anymore. And, like, fortunately I'll probably be able to apply my skills elsewhere, but, like, obviously I can't do that. I didn't drive for a year, so I had to rely very heavily upon other people. I don't work, which has really lost a lot of, like, myself, you know, a lot of, like, the things that I put into the world. So there's, like, a lot of loss here, and I am fine most of the time. The place where I am the worst, or, like, the worst, that's not fair. Like, I don't even mean it the way I said it. Like, the place where I struggle the most and, like, express those negative feelings is the doctor's office, because they're like, oh, how's it going? And then I'm like, crappy. Here's all these myriad of symptoms and issues and things I cannot do. And then they're like, you sound depressed. And I'm like, how would you talk about losing the ability to do everything you used to do all the time in a positive way?
And I think we have both talked about too, like, we're very open about mental health, supporting mental health, and sometimes, like, finding a label for what you're going through, whether that be anxiety, whether that be depression, is helpful. But again, here's another example of, like, every single doctor has told you this, and you're like, yeah, I've been through my hard times. I've been through shit. Like, go back to this fall when we were talking all the time about how hard it was to kind of, like, move through your day. And I see you progressing to this state of being like, but I move throughout my day. I'm taking on new opportunities. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're like, that's not the focus right now. Is, yes, I'm taking care of my mental health. There are still challenges, but this is not the result of me being depressed. And that is what is being thrown at you by all of these different care providers.
Yeah. It's incredibly shocking to me, especially because, so I want to be like, I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I think therapy is phenomenal, and I think if you're a therapist and psychiatrist and you decide that, like, you need to do additional things like medication to help, you know, function as a person, I think those are great things. But I also think that, like, people need to be putting thought behind when and why they are going to these different treatments, right? So I'm happy to see a counselor for the possible trauma, or more likely the loss of all the things that I could experience before. The main issue isn't in that they're suggesting therapy. I don't mind that. And I am going to therapy for this. The problem comes where it feels like predominantly male doctors, will see me cry. And I will cry while telling them that I don't know that I'll ever be able to teach again, and that makes me feel sad. They will immediately, like, I was in an eye doctor appointment, and I had really hoped this eye doctor was going to be, like, super helpful, right? I have really bad vision issues. It causes a lot of the headaches, and I was so excited. I thought, this is it. They're going to give me glasses. I'll be able to see better, and my brain will work better because I can see, and everything will be great. No, he was fine. He did not offer me much, but he referred me to somebody who ended up helping me a lot, so that's great. But when he basically told me there was nothing that could help me, which ended up not being true, there were glasses that could help, I started crying, and I had a panic attack, like, in the office, which it's a concerning thing. Like, I did cry pretty heavily, but, like, he just was like, I think you have PTSD, and I'm like, you're an optometrist. Like, you're not allowed to diagnose me with PTSD. And then I was actually really pissed that he said that, because because again, I was like, if you were told that the one thing you thought was going to make your life easier, and that's really what I was looking for, was something that was going to be easy to fix this, as opposed to more therapy, more hard work on my part. I just wanted an easy answer. You would cry too, doctor, whatever. Again, he's not a bad guy. Like, don't, whatever. He's fine. But, and then all of these doctors, I found out, they're like writing in my chart. So I have all these doctors writing in my chart that I'm like that I'm like unstable because I cry during like 1 out of every 3 appointments. So much so that one time I had a physical therapist be like, "You're much more stable than your chart reads." And I was like, "I believe that." Yeah.
Oh my God. I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
What? Sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted you. Please continue. I'm seething.
No,
I
no,
can't
no.
even.
It's crazy because like they're totally writing that I'm, and then it's frustrating too because a couple times they'll say things like, "Well, you might not be able to get better until you deal with this depression," and I was like, "I am not depressed. Like, if you were depressed, okay, if I were depressed, which I've been depressed in my life for sure before, it affects you throughout your day or throughout activities. I have just done everything I can to participate. Like, I did not pull away from friendships. I did not, it was isolating, right? But like friends came to me and I found ways to see them. Like, I did everything I was allowed to do with my brain injury. I did. And I would push myself. I flew to visit Brooke in London. I did things with this brain injury and I tried and I'm trying to live life. But it feels like then they're being like, "Well, you're sad, so your brain injury's not healing because you are emotional." And I'm like, and that is such a heavy thing to like throw on me. And I know in my soul that they mean like, if you're depressed and your brain activity is lowered because you're dealing with depression, that can affect your healing process. And all of those things are true. But the way that these male doctors present these ideas to me is insane.
Yeah.
I don't know how, like, they need to have an extra bedside manner class.
And I feel like there's so much in what you said. And like one thing I want to state first of all is, as you guys know from listening to this podcast, Erica is one of the most eloquent people ever. She goes into these appointments. She's prepared. She explains what she's done, what's not working, what she wants to try. Girl has her receipts. She knows what she wants. Like, it should be this team collaborative effort. And it's crazy to me that they are, well, it's not crazy to me because we know this happens to women all the time, but because you showed the emotion, you could be a lawyer in court, and if you were overcome with emotion, you could be a teacher, you could be this. Anytime you show emotion, discounted, she's crazy, discounted, she's clearly dealing with something that she doesn't have a handle on, which not only is completely disrespectful, off the wall, and not true, it's not helpful. It's never helpful.
No. And what's super funny to me about it every time is that one of the number one symptoms of a brain injury is emotional regulation difficulties. And I do struggle a little bit, right? Like, I know that I'm quicker to tears, I'm quicker to anger, like that is true, but I have a pretty good handle on like reeling, being in control of myself. But I'm like, guys, of course I'm crying. Are you kidding me? Like, my brain is bruised. And when you have heightened emotions, it's harder on your brain. Like, things are firing, and mine don't fire as fast as they should. And so it's harder. And oftentimes, not as much anymore, but especially in the beginning when they were constantly writing that I was depressed and that I was crying all the time, which I was only crying at the doctor's office, it was because once I got upset, I would get confused. It was very hard for me to understand big feelings. So even though the big feeling makes sense, like I would cry when people would ask me about work often, because especially in the beginning when my students were still my students and they hadn't moved to another grade yet and things like that, it was hard for me to feel like I had left them, and I would cry, but I wouldn't understand. I couldn't process or verbalize those thoughts or feelings to people, so I'd get like upset, and then when you get confused, you cry. Like, at least for me with a brain injury, when I would get confused, I'd just cry. Like I had no recourse. Even if I don't feel sad, my brain's like, you should probably cry. And I think it stems, side note, sorry, I have to do this. Just for anyone who's listening, if you ever have a brain injury or someone with a brain injury, I think some of the symptoms are similar to like newborns. Like the desire to cry at random things, I think comes from an attempt of like, I don't know what to do. I need help. So I'm going to cry to bring attention to what's happening, even though I'm not sad. Like I would cry like just being confused over like, oh, I don't know how to cook this. I'm going to just cry and someone will come fix it. And it wasn't even sad. And I wasn't trying to like manipulate people. It was very weird. And that's mostly gone. But one thing I still do is, I don't know if you guys have heard like babies startle. So like if I'm sitting somewhere and someone like says something near me and I don't know they're going to talk, I will like jolt, but I'll do it every single time that they suddenly speak again. And I'm actually not startled, but I have like a physical response, and newborns do that. And I'm like, how much is my brain healing is trying to revert back to like, I mean, maybe there are new cells, I don't know, but I just think like how much of it is reverting to some of those like really instinctual first signs of keeping you alive functioning.
Yeah.
Brains are cool.
One thing when it comes to crying too that I think we forget is that it is just it's a release for your body, right? So like you
Mm-hmm.
can cry because like Erica said, you're confused, you're angry, it's not always because you're sad. You cry when you're happy. It's an emotional release that I think,
Right.
you know what they say when you're in fight or flight, so whether you're holding on to a lot of stress or you can't always communicate the way you need to. And so, but it's funny how your body, like you can cry. It can be like three tears roll down your face. Then you take a breath and you're like, all right, I'm here now. Why
Yeah.
can't we recognize that in a very vulnerable space where you're telling a woman for probably the 50th time, you're working really hard, but here's another barrier in your path
Mm-hmm.
to healing that is going to not only slow you down or it's going to change an expectation or guess what you're that is upsetting. And I just
Mm-hmm.
don't understand how, and maybe female doctors do this better, but to hold space for that, let that person, I mean, yes, you would acknowledge like having a panic attack, that that can be really hard. It can be a lot, but like I just feel like in the perfect world, give this person the space and then when they come back to themselves, you have a conversation. Like it's just like you said, it's any normal part of big life events.
Yes. And I think the reason that it comes across so offensive is exactly what you said, is like they don't wait. And
Mm,
it's because it pops in their head and they're like, oh, you're crying, you should get therapy, which I
mhm.
do think that suggesting therapy was a reasonable part of my treatment plan. And I'm not against it and I am doing it. But it was in this way that I would cry when speaking to a professional because they would ask me a question that was, to be frank, like triggering or hard for me, and I would cry. And while I'm tearing up, and again, other than the one time of the eye doctor, I'm just like tears spilling over. I'm not like dry heave crying like I would, watching a Disney movie. Okay, I'm lightly crying like I would for a Super Bowl commercial. Okay, different. And then as I'm lightly crying, they're like, "Oh, you should see a therapist. I think you're depressed." And I'm like, could, could they not have, like, if they really believed that like I needed to see a counselor, which I likely do, like that's fine. Could they not have waited till like, I don't know, 10 minutes later when we moved on a little bit, and then they could be like, I also think like additional maybe like counseling to process through how awful this has to have been and the life changes you're experiencing would be great.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'd handle that a lot better than the way it's been delivered to me, like you said, 50 times.
And do you know what came to my mind when you were saying this? And our male listeners out there, we know we have a few. Don't take this the wrong way, but from my understanding is so often when men listen to women talk about things they're struggling with or having a bit, they go into
Mm-hmm.
fix it mode, right? Like it's like, and
Yeah.
especially when women are overcome with emotion, it's like, I need to offer you something to fix this. Emotions are meant to be fixed. You shouldn't be having this right now because this isn't a place for it. First of all, there's a lot wrong with that, and like the doctor's office is
Mm-hmm.
often a place for emotions. I mean, no one really likes going to the doctor. Normally, you're always kind of scared, you're always on edge.
Yeah.
again, that bedside manner really needs to be worked more into the system. But on top of it too, I just think like exactly like what you're saying is approaching that, just giving the space, not saying anything, just holding space for your patient to feel what they need to
Hmm.
feel. And then throughout the conversation, if you still really feel like you need to say something, then do it. But when a doctor, and I guess female doctors could do this too, or however they identify,
Yeah.
but when someone jumps in a moment of like when you're feeling vulnerable and overwhelmed and be like, here's this thing you should do to probably fix what's happening here. Whoa.
Hmm.
Like it not only does it probably feel like hurtful and like an attack, but that totally shifts, or if anything, breaks the rapport that was built in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, because and I think part of it is that I interpret it as these people saying like I'm a hysterical woman and like that I'm having unreasonable emotions because if my if someone had died and I was mentioning that someone died, right? Um, People wouldn't say I need counseling when I cried of talking about someone dying, right? Like that would be normal. And I'm not trying to equate brain injury to like death, but like it's similar in the idea that it's a huge loss. And like I've noticed that I'm going through the stages of grief, which we can go there if we want to, but it's not like you go through one and you go through all five and then it's done. It's just this horrible like maze. Um but like it just feels diminishing. And I hope that if anyone listens to this who is working with people who have had such a huge like life transition loss, to recognize that as what it is, as like the death of that future. Because that person that I was and was gonna be and hopefully would become, they're gone forever. And I can do nothing to get I can do nothing to get it back, right? So now I have to do something different, which doesn't mean it's going to be worse, but it does mean that the future that I had planned with my, skills and job and all those things is dead to me. And I think it's reasonable to be upset. And I do think it's reasonable to go to therapy for it. I think it's a great idea to help process, but it is not like a flaw or weird to get upset about it.
Or something that needs to be fixed, right? Like there's always
Hmm.
space, I think, for both. Like even again,
Yeah.
you could go through what Erica's gone through and fall into a time of depression. Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. And so the fact that me, and I'm not going to lie to you, maybe 6 months ago, that is something that they could have said to you. And like, as your
Hmm.
friend, I would have been like, yeah, I see some of those tendencies for you, you know?
Hmm.
But now I just think it's very interesting that it's almost like these, yeah, like you have to go fix this. And guess what? If it is PTSD, if it is that, it will not be fixed. That's also not the point of
Right.
therapy. It gives you coping,
Hmm.
like it brings you awareness, it gives you tools. But moving forward in your life, having a life altering event is something that you're going to have to hold space for both for the rest of your life. So again, I just come back to the fact
Yeah.
that not only does it diminish you, like you said,
Hmm.
but it also isn't helpful. It's just not.
Right, right. And I think what's one of the issues that made it so weird is that I've probably gone through bouts of depression throughout this, which I think is normal and okay. And I actually did try to get therapy for a long time. Fun fact, can be super hard to get a therapist.
Oh yeah.
I was turned away by 7 different places because I had a work injury. So like I would call all these places and they would tell me no. And so the couple places I got in, I was on wait list for 6 months. And 6 months, yeah, that's a long time. And then when I called to check in on my place on the wait list, they had taken me off of it. I don't know why. And finally, somebody called me a year after I was kicked in the face. I'd been trying to get counseling for 8 months. Somebody finally had an opening for me, and now I'm receiving services, which is crazy. So, like, also getting told you need therapy by these doctors while you've been trying is this insane cycle. But so let's say that my therapist decides that I do qualify for depression, which I would be fine with that diagnosis from her, but I would be considered like situationally depressed, not
Mhm.
chemically depressed. And I know that a lot of times the differentiation doesn't matter, but it does here. So like I had one doctor recommend mood stabilizers, which I was like, you want me to take a mood stabilizer because I'm situationally depressed that I am unable to work or do all of these things. Whereas a mood stabilizer, at least in my opinion, makes sense for somebody who has like a chemical issue, in which case medication makes absolute sense because none of the environmental switches you do are going to help, right? Or make a significant help, right? They will help. But I understand that. But for me, where I was like, I'm sad because I don't have my job, and I'm sad because I can't drive to the gym and I'm not allowed to work out, and I'm sad because this and this and this, the mood stabilizer would just make me not feel as much, and that doesn't seem like it would help me improve in any capacity. The only thing that I felt like is it would make me not cry at my appointment. It would make me care less, which probably would have stunted, in my opinion, it would have stunted my healing journey, because if I didn't have the heightened emotions around wanting to improve, why would I have spent the last year in 3 different types of therapies, doing the therapies at home all the time, if I didn't care?
Yeah. That is such a critical thing, I think, that you just said. And again, things can always get misunderstood, so I hope no one takes this in a negative way. But yes, sometimes medications and helping people cope with like the intense lows, the intense like anxiety is critical to their healing path forward. But
Yes.
you're saying right now that for you, it would numb that internal drive that you have used to pick yourself up every single day and go to the appointments and do the thing and choose to move forward, when this has been constantly like a who knows what today will bring. And that's really freaking hard. And in this case, it's
Yeah.
like that's where medication would possibly stunt that, like you're saying. And so that's where, again, it's things are never black and white. It's never the same for everybody. And I think doctors recognize that and understand that. But in your case, I just hear again and again that you're being told, like, well, this will help cure you. And you're like, I know deep in my soul that it will not. Because here's a perfect example of, yeah, it's like you don't need it because you cannot get out of bed in the morning. Some people
Right.
do. And you're like, no, it would actually harm the resiliency that, like, not saying if you're on it you can't have, but like I'm sure you guys understand what I'm saying. It's just it's never a fix for everybody, and Erica is unfortunately one of those people that's caught up in the system right now as it is.
Right. It's for my situation where I do not have a chemical imbalance, where I have a situation that is causing it, right? Which I think if you ask most people who are depressed, they're telling you it doesn't matter what's going on. Like, I may love my children, love my husband, love my life. I'm depressed and I can't explain why. And that is something which, is incredibly painful and probably makes, the guilt about feeling that way even more difficult to bear. And then I think that makes sense to, when you're in therapy, to consider it along with the lifestyle changes, doing those medications. But I think we've gotten to this weird point where, and maybe medications where, situation people should go to when they can't escape a situation. I'm not saying no to it. I'm just saying what I find really weird about the situation is anxiety is not inherently bad. Like, sadness is not inherently bad. We don't want to avoid those feelings. Stress, cortisol can be bad for you, right? But like, you need stress and cortisol to propel you in certain situations, right? Think about adrenaline rushing through you when something bad is happening. Think about the stress that you have when you wake up really early in the morning on a day of work where you're like, I have to get in there early to get this done and get it off my plate, and then your life is better.
Yes.
Obviously, there's an example, like there's situations where that goes way too far, but I need some of these emotions to keep me in the game. Because if I'm not stressed about the future, if I feel totally level with how I live now, it's too damn hard to keep trying with a brain injury if you do not care. Or I guess I shouldn't even say don't care, because I know you'd still care, but like, if I wouldn't feel like sad about these losses, why would I spend so many hours doing it? These emotions, well, they suck. They propel me to get as close to the finish line as I can. I
Yeah.
need them.
I have to say, I have full on goosebumps because I think what you're saying is a life lesson that a lot of us maybe, you don't learn until it hits you. Those
Mm-hmm.
periods of your life that you are in trial, you know, a valley, you might feel like you're walking through fire. Those are like sharpening you, showing your character, and that is when, yeah, guess what? It's probably this period of this year, it is probably taxing your body in some ways because you're relying on resilience and grit and emotions, and like it is a lot. It is probably exhausting, but that is the human experience, right? Like whether it's this, whether it's grief because you eventually lose someone in your life, because shit will happen, you guys. Like the way you're
Right.
approaching this, I just think is so, it felt like it hit me like a reminder of like, yeah. And that's when supports like therapy and friends and like leaning on people is so crucial. But to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that that won't take away those emotions, those challenges,
Right.
because they're actually necessary to keep in that fight forward. And learning to live with them, I almost imagine it's like you sit in a room where like it's sitting next to you and you're like, God, my life would be so much better if I didn't have this right now. But
Mm-hmm.
you are, it just blows my mind that you could recognize that you're like, but I need this right now. I need it. I know
Yeah.
I do. And that shows how much work and how much effort you have put in so far. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just, yeah, I'm blown away. And also like, I'm thank you for speaking about this because this is the real conversations that sometimes like
Mm-hmm.
I get lost in my own head and I've never even been through something as truly traumatic and as like drawn out and hard as you have, but every healing journey, despite what it is, probably has some aspects of this. So wanting to numb those feelings or get rid of them can be normal, but learning to
Yeah.
accept that they are there as like part of your
Mm-hmm.
wiring to drive you forward and help you survive is a critical piece, I think, to actually really overcoming and like becoming better on the other side of shit that life throws at you.
You made me think about, so I am in therapy, like I've mentioned, and I do think it's helpful. Um, Yesterday I went, and what we discussed, what she's like, what do you want to work on? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I don't care. Which I actually do have issues going to therapy. Like I think it's phenomenal. Like I've even considered becoming a therapist, but like for some reason when I'm in there, I get very like closed off. It's something that I have worked on, and I did do therapy for 4 years with one woman, and I did really well there. But like starting over is super tough. But she's like, "What do you want to work on?" And finally, like we dug, and I was kind of like, one of the main things I need to work on is that I'm starting to not care. Like I'm starting to get like fatigued out from effort, like care fatigue for the situation. I'm like, I'm just done. I don't know how much longer I can put energy into this healing process. And so it is kind of funny that you say that because it makes me think like the thing I'm actually hoping to work on in therapy is to still continue to be able to harness those things for motivation as opposed to just being like, okay, like this is it, because I don't have another year, and I don't know if I do, but I don't have another year of like trying that hard in me. So I will be working on therapy to try to help me get that motivation back. And I think some of it will be the desire to be myself again and to not have to lose out on so many things.
One thing, it's going to sound like I'm completely contradicting myself, but I do think, but it's one thing that, this next year of your life, it could be interesting if maybe it turns out that like what you need in like your individual kind of journey is to now like release the reins, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
still you're a driven person, Erica, so like you're gonna keep doing the things, you're gonna keep showing up and challenging yourself, but like I know sometimes there's seasons where like you put in the work and you push, and then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like we're met with, okay, now I have to like surrender it in a way and just trust that. I don't know if that's for you yet because again, there's still
Yeah.
healing, and I think it's very good and important and natural that you're like, no, I want to keep this, and you feel it fading. So I maybe, that'll be something we can follow up on. Is like,
Yeah.
as you continue forward, is it a, okay, these were things I needed, almost this, I needed to dig in a little further to kind of re-energize myself and get that back, because it's been
Hmm.
a long hard road already and I don't feel like I have a lot left? Or are you starting to reach your turning point of like, I have physically done all I can and I will like hold on to these parts of myself, but then a piece of you has to like release it and has to
Yeah.
almost go with the flow of life and just trust that whatever you believe in as a bigger picture is gonna like carry you. I I don't know.
Hmm.
I could see it going both ways, but I have to like thank you for being honest too about the fact that like that's a challenge for you in therapy, because
Hmm.
that's also the thing I think that's a misconception. It's like, yeah, I'll go in, they'll tell me like it'll be fixed. It will never ever be totally fixed. And like I've learned that the hard way too. I'm like, I've worked on this shit before. Why is it coming back up? And my therapist is
Hmm.
like, because it's a wound that will be with you forever, and
Hmm.
it's part of you. So you have to learn to live with it. You're not gonna completely heal it. And I'm like, shit. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. It's one of those things where some days, like we've talked about this before, and I know you guys will have heard this and recognize it. It's like sometimes, I think you and I are able to look at those wound points and be like, oh, I can see, how I feel the highs of life more because I went through those lows, and it's like my life is more colorful, like it is a more well-rounded experience, and that is great. And then on the other day, you can be like, I don't want to have to be better for it. I want it to be over.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the real kicker with not just mental health, but like life experience, human experience existing is
Yeah.
there is no right way to handle it. There is no answer. It is just a never-ending navigation of what works in the moment.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, and what this requires of you now, which might change.
Yeah.
It might be a like you need to dig in, well, not deeper, because I feel like you've really dug in as deep as you can, but you need new tools to help you forward, or you learn that,
Right.
yeah, this is a point that now you accept the changes. I don't know. But
Well, that's like actually super timely. Like I don't know if we have time to like go into it, but I know that there are some people who have some similar issues who listen. So just, for not just brain injuries, but like anybody who's going through different experiences, especially with healing, you know, one thing that is starting to become really apparent is we don't know how far my healing will progress, right? So we just have to look at like what accommodations and coping mechanisms are in place to make life functional again. And, kind of learning that things might look different, and the new normal is not what you had hoped it would be, but that like with enough of these I use the word accommodations because I was a special education teacher. The doctors usually call it coping skills. Like I have special glasses and special apps on my phone and different things so that I can access the world more easily. Um, but like that is something I'm really working on coming to terms with, accepting is like that I might have to use them forever. And for some reason that feels like a bit of a failure as opposed to like a wow, cool, I have this thing that helps me do stuff. Whereas like, yes, I'm excited that it helps me, but I'm also really frustrated that I need it. And I think, part of that experience is being like, it's okay that I need it. And it's, it's not like an inherent failure that I'm not healed to the point that I had hoped.
I think it can apply, like you're saying, to physical struggles, emotional, mental, even changes. Like there's some aspect of
Mm-hmm.
accepting not a new normal, but yeah, maybe this is like the next version of you, or like what your next season is
Yeah.
gonna hold. And absolutely, just like not, because I can do that too. I can hold on to like, but I want to get back to this place. Remember when I felt this, or like that. You
Yeah.
can't go back. You can't. And
Mm-hmm.
even you can't control enough to ensure what's forward. You like have to be in the here and now and learn to accept And accept it means you still push forward, you still do what you can. But like I hear more of like what you're saying is accepting it in the way of like self-love and grace of like this is not a
Mm-hmm.
failure. And it makes me sad that you even say that because I'm like you are the furthest thing from what I would like from a failure, whatever that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you are so incredibly resilient and but I'm also not saying you should change that feeling, but it's a holding space for it and then
Yeah.
like learning to kind of accept that like that's gonna almost like be something that's like in your car on like your road and your journey through life now. It's just that little piece of something you're like, I didn't want you there, but for whatever reason, it's like like
Mm-hmm.
stepping into your whole self right now is like learning to maybe not love, but like accept that piece.
Actually, that makes me think about something. So, like, I'm gonna tell like a really dumb story that's kind of related that makes me think of. So, the one really big benefit that I truly do see coming out of this is that I am like so willing to annoy people. It is actually like painful. And I like am totally fine in sitting in discomfort with other people, especially if it is their own. Um, so I have some issues reading now. I'm pretty good at like reading, but in different environments, like if the font is weird or if the background is weird, I can't read it. And unintentionally, my first response is like, I can't read, which is not entirely true, but is kind of true. So I frequently go into places and tell other adults like, oh, I can't read. I need you to read it to me. I cannot read that at all. And I'm like super happy to do that. It's like they like look at me weird, but a lot of times people end up being super kind. And I was like, I am super comfortable telling people I can't read, or that I'm struggling to read, or telling people what I cannot do. I usually don't go into the details, but I was like, oh, I can't do that by myself. I need help. And I like to think of it as like I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be the first person that this adult meets who they know is an adult who can't read. Because most Americans don't, I don't think most people know this, but I think it's like a third of Americans are like functionally illiterate. And then there's a portion of several adults who are like actually unable to read. Functionally illiterate just means like they can't read, like above like a fourth grade level. And then there's even like people who struggle even greater, which is kind of the level that I'm at with certain fonts. Is like I just can't. I have no idea what it says. I don't know. I'll just look at it and have no concept. And I like to think that if I'm super comfortable in telling someone I can't read, and I present myself as like that's not a big deal, hopefully the next person who still feels like anxious or embarrassed or whatever about the fact that they're an adult who's not yet reading, that person will receive them and be like, oh yeah, sometimes people can't read. Like, I I don't know. I think I'm trying to look as like that's the positive I can maybe give into the world is that if some of my students, I think of them as like they're my babies, right? But they're going to grow up, and if some of them never access reading in the same way that like the general public does, hopefully I will have embarrassed enough people in public settings by telling them I can't read that it'll be easy by the time that they're having to be like, oh, can you read the pamphlet to me? I just don't know what it says, and it won't be a big deal because sometimes, friends, grown-ups can't read. It happens.
I think that's already such a beautiful thing that, and you're right, you're totally the person to step into that because you're brave, you're outgoing, you're very like, and I mean this in the best way, you're very charming, right? So I'm sure people would fall over themselves to be like, please, beautiful, lovely, intelligent, like, let me help you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like planting that seed for like that kindness to grow or that compassion for
Mm-hmm.
especially a population, individuals with disabilities that you are incredibly passionate about. And again, while you didn't ask for this and you were already advocating for them without your own like disability struggle,
Mm-hmm.
I love, thank you for sharing that. I love that you see that side of this and that you're also willing to take it on because that's an active choice,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh yeah, and actually, it was embarrassing like the first couple times, especially when like reading was super out of my like right now. If you hand me something in the right environment, I can read it. But there was a time, as you know, where it was just like very little, and now. And it was super embarrassing the first few times, but it has taught me, and that the world, people are good for the most part. Like that thing that you're embarrassed about in public that you have to deal with, whether, it be a cognitive thing or a physical thing or an emotional thing, people are likely going to help you. Like, I've had people, like, some people look a little shocked when I tell them that I can't read the board and I need their help. But they are almost always, after that initial moment, like, incredibly compassionate and
Yeah.
and have no issue reading it to me, or have no issue like asking me what I like and helping me. A lot of times it's like coffee shops because they'll do cursive and I can't read in cursive. Like, they'll like help me, right? And they're super nice and they help me figure out a drink. And I'm trying to hold on to these things because, like I said, I am going through the stages of grief and I'm in this really fun set of anger right now. And while I'm holding space for that anger, I also try to keep in mind, like, at least now I've gotten to see a really beautiful side of random people. And hopefully I like to think that I'm maybe making it a little bit easier for the person who comes after me. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I'm going to hold on to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're using your skill set, what you're confident in, and what you have gathered from like a time of struggle and what you've learned is important to like pay it forward in a way. And yeah, my mind. And I know we can talk about this later after, but like I'm already like, oh my gosh, all the things you could do, all the things you will do, like with this knowledge and with this like resiliency that you've built upon the caring heart and wanting to serve people that you've had always. I will, say in kind of like our last few minutes, is there anything else you want to share? And guys, this is something we will, I'm sure, come back to. We got to do it in chunks. But this journey, as
Yeah.
we talked about this whole episode, is not over for Erica. And but yeah, anything you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. If you're experiencing anything similar to a brain injury, obviously I can't speak to everything, but I know lots of life struggles will feel similarly, is to, remember, like we've said, like grief is not linear and healing is not linear. I have days where I make huge progress. I have days where the thing I progressed on is worse, especially like just an example, like as my brain works faster and better, I have developed a pretty significant stutter when I'm talking too fast or when I'm in like a busy environment. And so it looks like I'm getting quote unquote worse, but I'm not, right? But it can feel that way and it is embarrassing because it's like it's a public facing part of my ailment. But to try to keep in mind as you are healing from whatever it is that is ailing you, that path is not straightforward, and just because you're backing up does not mean you're going to keep moving forward. And I'm saying this as much for anyone listening as much as it is for myself, because we're having this conversation today because I told Brooke I'm feeling sad. So let's dive in.
Bare our souls. Well, thank you. Thank you for being willing to be brave and talk about it. And I know from feedback I've gotten that it means a lot to people that you share because they, like you said, they can relate to it in different ways. And I think just talking openly about these things is so important because everybody's going to have their thing or things in life that they're going to run into.
Right.
And just hearing other people's experiences, know you're not alone, and that people before you who are willing to share where their struggles may lay on this path, hopefully that can help you advocate for yourself or just know if something happens, just help you to be able to process it and, move forward
Yeah.
from it. So,
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and thank you to our captive audience who got to listen to me talk about myself for an hour.
that's why they tune in. They love us, right? All right, guys, have a good one, and we will catch you on the next episode.